I was recently a guest on the Paranormal Portal with Brent Thomas. Go to your podcast player and check it out. Look up Paranormal Portal with Brent Thomas. I think he named it Chronicles of Sasquatch with Wes Germer. Had a great time. Want to thank Brent again for having me on. It was kind of fun being the interviewee instead of the interviewer. Support for this episode comes from MyBookie.ag. Bet with the best at MyBookie.ag online sportsbook. Only at MyBookie can you bet on your favorite teams and athletes and receive rewards for your action. MyBookie is the best place to bet on football every weekend. This year, they are hosting the first online handicapping super contest. First place is guaranteed to win at least $100,000, and it only costs $100 to enter. All you gotta do is pick 5 NFL games against the spread every week to climb the leaderboard. MyBookie also has live in-game betting on every NFL game. Up to $1,000 first deposit bonus. Double your first deposit. Use promo code Sasquatch to activate the offer. What are you waiting for? Visit MyBookie online today. That's MyBookie. And don't forget to use the promo code Sasquatch when creating your account to claim the bonus. You bet, you win, you get paid. Thank you to MyBookie for sponsoring the show.
Black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at SasquatchChronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. You definitely don't want to miss this one. We'll be talking to Mike, who comes to us from Mississippi. And Mike actually saw one of his neighbors, an older lady, feeding these creatures when he was very young. And we'll also be talking to Timothy Renner from Strange Familiars podcast. You definitely want to check it out. If you listen to Sasquatch Chronicles on your podcast player, check out Tim's podcast. And Tim's going to be sharing some historical accounts with us before we get to Mike. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out SasquatchChronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Tim to the show. Tim, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And I know you're going to go into some historical accounts. Before we went on the air, you were talking about a festival you're going to be at and a presenter at. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've been involved in this for years now. I forget, at least, I don't know, years, since the beginning. It's called Albatwitch Day. It's in Columbia, Pennsylvania. And it's a little cryptic festival we have. Well, it's getting bigger every year. It's not so little anymore. But it benefits the Columbia Historic Preservation Society. So everything there, most everything's free. So you come, bring your family. It's a great day for the family. There's all kinds of activities for kids. there's a few things that cost money. I think we have trolley rides. They'll take you up to Chickies Rock, which is the place where the Albatwitches were our little hairy little people here in Pennsylvania. That's what they call our little people, the little hairy cryptids. They'll take you on trolley rides. You got to buy tickets for those, but they'll take you up to Chickies Rock, which is kind of the sort of folkloric home of the Albatwitch, and they give you apples to throw out for the Albatwitches there. That's fun for the kids. There's other activities for the kids. There's paranormal speakers. Rick Fisher will be giving a talk. John Sable. Some guy named Tim Renner is giving a talk on Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. There's my friend Chad's going to be doing woodcrafting demonstrations there. So if you like kind of, survival and woodcraft stuff, he'll be doing that. There's a naturalist named Jack Hubley, well-known local naturalist. He'll be there giving a talk on nature and so forth. There's a whole bunch of bands playing. So if you like music, there's all kinds of music going on all day. And at night, we'll be doing ghost tours. There's a river walk that goes up to an old haunted railroad tunnel. And there's 3 tours. I will be giving the 7 o'clock tour. I've never given a ghost tour before. Don't know if I'm any good at it. But if you want to go with me, 7 o'clock. There's 3 tours. I think that's the middle one. I think it's 6, 7, and 8 are the 3 tours. If you want to go with me, reserve a ticket for 7 o'clock. Now, those do cost. But like I said, everything benefits the Historic Society in Columbia there.
Very cool. What are the dates, and is there a website?
Yes, it's albatwitchday.com, and it's Saturday, October 12th, one day only.
And I'll throw a link up underneath this episode for anyone who's interested in going. And Tim, you're the historical guy. You know all the goods on Bigfoot, historically speaking. And I know you brought us some stories from Canada. I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So these stories start out with this guy named Mike King, and I'd never heard of him before, but apparently he was pretty famous back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He was they called him kind of the British Columbia's Paul Bunyan. So he was a timber cruiser and a prospector, and he was kind of famous for exploring the area on foot and alone. And before we get into his Bigfoot story, I had to relate. There's this great story about him. He was out blazing trails. He laid down to take a nap, and he woke up, and there were 2 bear cubs there. And he picked one up and put it on his lap to pet it, and reached over to get the other bear cub, and then the mother bear comes out right at that moment. So he gets chased by this bear, and he runs into a swamp and gets stuck. This is how tough this guy is. He said he knows the bear's coming, and he knows it's going to swat the first thing he swings at. He said the grizzly's going to swat it out of his hand. So he takes a stick in one hand. He only has a hatchet. That's the only weapon he has. And he puts the hatchet in his other hand. So he swings the branch. The bear knocks that out of his hands, and then he said he's going to try to kill it with the hatchet. He wanted to aim for its snout and missed, glanced off its head, stunned the bear, but then, so he takes off running again, gets himself free, but then the bear's following, and he's running from this bear, and he says he hears people chopping wood, so he just heads towards the sound of the chopping wood, and he's getting closer. He said the bear's getting closer to him every step. And then he just feels this heavy blow to his back, and he blacks out. And when he wakes up, he's surrounded by loggers, and he looks over and he sees the bear was crushed beneath the tree. So he ran just in time. He got saved by these guys. They dropped a tree on the bear.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I thought it was an amazing story of this guy. And, I mean, how tough you'd have to be back in the 1800s to explore by yourself and just go out and blaze trails with just a hatchet.
Yeah, he sounds like the modern day Paul Bunyan. Sounds like
right?
Maybe that's where they got it from. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he had a Bigfoot encounter. So this is from the Evening Statesman from Walla Walla, Washington, July 8th, 1904. It's weird being in the woods, wild, hairy, and affrighted. He fled on approach of prospector. Peculiar experience of Mike King in the big forests of British Columbia. Vancouver, British Columbia, July 8th. A weird story of a wild man encountered far inland from the headwaters of Campbell River is told by Mike King, who had penetrated into a territory religiously shunned by Indians, none of whom would either occupy him as usual, nor make any explanation of their conduct. Accompany him as usual, nor make any explanation of their conduct. King had been making his solitary way through the forest, not having seen a human fact for days, when a cry of mingled surprise and fear, very human in its quality, and far into the forest land brought him to a sudden halt, rifle in hand and eyes straining for explanation. This was quickly afforded, but in such a manner as to try the nerves of even such a woodsman as Mike King. About 100 yards from where he stood, or even less, an uncouth human faced him, seemingly all uncertain whether to stand or fly. The form was that of a large, angular man completely covered with hair, with long arms hanging loosely and hands reaching below the knees. The eyes were quick and penetrating, shining strangely through a tangle of unkempt hair. The object was unmistakably and uncompromisingly human, Mr. King attests, and yet no human being such as any nation, tribe, or country knows. After a long moment's scrutiny of the disturber of his solitude, the wild being decided upon flight and nimbly ran up the hillside, assisting his movements with his long arms and uttering at intervals cries of very human alarm, mystification, and fear. Once it paused on the hillside and stood again, gazing at the astounded white man, then plunged into the wilderness and was lost to sight, although the cracking of branches for some time afterward betrayed its hurried progress through the woods. Coming to the place where it had stood when first seen, Mr. King found that the wild creature had been engaged in a little water hole in washing edible grass roots, a pile of the clean roots neatly made resting on one side of the hole. No further meeting with the wild man fell to the cruiser's lot, although he heard at intervals his curious cries as he sat at night by a roaring fire and waited for the sequel to the adventure, his rifle across his knees. There's no conclusive and satisfactory explanation of the phenomenon. Mr. King has brought the matter up time and again in his talks with the Indians, whose confidence he enjoys. Bit by bit, as he patched together theory and tribal tradition, by which it appears that they credit the coming of the original wild man to the days of the Spanish occupation of certain of the West Coast ports. At one of these, Nootka, it is alleged an immense hairy creature, either baboon or ape, escaped from one of the ships, and after terrorizing the aboriginal inhabitants, proceeded to make himself at home in the forest. Thence it is alleged to have issued upon one occasion and seized an Indian girl, with whom it set up housekeeping. The wild man seen by Mr. King is believed by the Indians to have been the offspring. As to whether this could be possible, the scientific authorities appear to differ. Mr. King does not often tell the story of his adventure, since the majority are apt to ventilate sarcastic observations that grow tiresome. He is in earnest, however, and any timberman on the North Pacific coast will attest to his reliability. Nor is a man who spent 3/4 of his life in the primeval solitudes, never tastes liquor, and has few superiors as woodsman, apt to see things in the woods, not actually existent. So I thought that was pretty cool. Big woodsman like that, and that's his encounter.
It is very cool. You know, every time you come on and you share the historical accounts, you know, they really do ring to the same stories people tell today as far as what they're seeing. And, you know, listening to that, how he got tired of telling his story, basically is being made fun of. You get a lot of that today, too. It is fascinating. Very fascinating account.
That's one of the things that convinced me that these, you know, we were talking about Bigfoot. They're talking about the same things. It's, even though they might describe them a little differently here and there, you know, their vocabulary was a little different. So when they say, you know, baboon sometimes or something like that, I don't think they mean an actual baboon. They just mean something big and hairy. But the behavior is so similar to the accounts we hear today. You know, the washing of the roots and stuff like that. You've heard that before. And just the way they react to people, it seems, you know, so much like what people are describing today that I just can't think that it's anything different.
Was that his only encounter?
That's the only one that I found. Now, there is another one that references his encounter from a guy named James McClay. And this is from 1906, again from the Evening Statesman, Walla Walla, Washington. See wild man in his cave. James McClay, while hunting, encounters mysterious creature. James McClay of Gabriola Island, the rediscoverer of Malaspina Gallery, has made another remarkable discovery on the island. The Vancouver Island wild man, strange and weird tales of whom have been reported from different parts of the island from time to time, has been seen by Mr. McClay. Several days ago, in company with a trapper, Mr. McClay was hunting on the northeast end of the island. Hearing noises and mumblings, as if proceeding from some strange animal, they started to investigate. A few feet up the side of a precipice, they perceived a cave, from which the noises seemed to emanate. Creeping carefully up, they were rooted to the ground with astonishment to perceive the wild man in the cave, rocking himself to and fro with folded arms and mumbling in a strange language, in which the trapper recognized broken phrases of French, which translated ran something like this: damn Johnny Bull and Wolf, they kill me people in Quebec. The description they give of the wild man's appearance is practically the same as that told by Mike King of Victoria, and others who have seen this strange creature, differing only in this particular, when at this occasion the Mowgli had a girdle of leaves around him. When seen before, he was always absolutely naked. He is a giant in size, very powerful looking and covered with long hair all over his body, many inches in length. From the fact that the only intelligible words he uttered are French, it is presumed he is French-Canadian. What connection there is between Johnny Bull and Wolfe in Quebec and the man is hard to say. Wolfe captured Quebec in 1754, and it may be possible that some of his ancestors fell while defending the city at that time. So they're talking about General Wolfe. I think it was a British general. While the two were gazing at him, he suddenly looked up, discovering their presence. For a few seconds, not a move was made on either side, until the trapper reached to lean his gun up against a rock, which action the wild man evidently interpreted as hostile movement. For giving vent to his usual half-man-like, half-wild beast-like shrieks, he leaped fully 10 feet from the cave into the water and swam outwards, using a stick rudely paddle-shaped at either end to help him in his progress, kicking his feet and paddling at the same time, progressing through the water with the speed of an average canoe. Going up the shoreline a short way, where Mr. McClay and his badly frightened companion could not follow him, the wild man made for shore and disappeared with the alacrity of a deer through the dense underbrush. Although vigilant search has been made by different parties since he was last seen, no more sight or tidings have been received of the wild man.
It's so odd, his description. You know, it sounds like a Sasquatch, but it's speaking French. You know,
right.
Or broken French. Makes you wonder if it was just a poor human being or if it was really one of these things.
Yeah, that's the thing with some of these articles. You know, and people talk to me about this a lot because I've filled books with this stuff. Some of them I think probably were people, you know, and it's hard to tell. But some of them, when they describe a giant guy covered in hair, I mean, the speaking French, yeah, that's troubling. But I mean, there are weird stories we hear here and there of these things speaking, you know, different languages. The other thing is maybe the guy thought he understood him and didn't. I don't know. You know, there's not a lot of detail with him.
That's true. I mean, sometimes you'll hear different languages and you'll be like, oh, I think I know what they said. You know what I mean? But in reality, you don't. But yeah, that's an interesting point. Was there, and he said the final one was in Canada as well?
Yeah, the final one's from Montreal. It's just a short one. This was printed in the Evening News, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, March 2nd, 1934. Montreal, March 2nd, a giant wild man who has been terrorizing residents of Harrison Mills near Vancouver has caused revival of legends of a vanished race of hairy mountain men, according to dispatches here today. The wild man, described as being huge, hairy, and nearly nude, has been seen 3 times in as many months, according to reports. The last person he frightened was Frank Dean of Harrison Mills. Dean was aroused during the night by the barking of his dog. He stepped out the door of his cabin and saw, in clear starlight, a huge hairy man who advanced on him growling. Dean leaped back inside his cabin and barred his door. Tracks in the snow the next day showed the wild man had prowled around the cabin and later gone into the bush. A hunter also said he saw the wild man and was so frightened that he dropped his bag of game and fled before the giant's attack.
That's a great one. Yeah,
that's a neat one. You always wish for more information, and I find, that's true today too. If anything ever gets in the newspaper, you're always like, "What? Wait, they didn't ask this question. They didn't ask that question." But it's still great to read these. I like I said, I just love these old accounts, and I think, for my part, when they talk about these big hairy things, even if they have some different descriptions, so much of the behavior is so much like what we hear that I think they're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I love the older accounts. That's why I love having you on. I like you and I like your podcast, but I love the fact that, you dig up these historical accounts I've never heard of, and it's, even though some of them might be human, it's still fascinating to listen to. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's the thing. We don't know with some of them, but hey, some of them I think are definitely what they're talking about. Like that guy, Mike King, he knew what he was looking at, when he saw something unusual in the woods, he knew it shouldn't have been there. Well, Timothy Renner from Strange Familiars, go to strangefamiliars.com on your podcast player. If you subscribe to Sasquatch Chronicles, definitely subscribe to Tim's podcast. Again, it's called Strange Familiars. I'll throw links below this episode, including that for the festival too as well. I wish I was in the area. I'd come check it out. I'm on the other side of the country, man.
Yeah, Albatwitch Day, October 12th. Hope everybody who can come. Like I said, everything's free. The paranormal talks are free. Most of the day's free. So it's a great time for family and everybody.
And I have Mike coming up next. You don't want to miss this. A New Hope. Support for Sasquatch Chronicles comes from Manscaped, who is #1 in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their Lawnmower 2.0 has proprietary skin-safe technology, so this trimmer won't nick or snag your nuts. Manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past. Always use the right tools for the job. Your balls will thank you. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code Sasquatch at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And don't forget to use the code Sasquatch. Manscaped.com has some really cool grooming items on there. I really dig the cologne. If you get a chance, check them out. I want to thank manscaped.com for sponsoring the show. Well, I want to welcome Mike to the show. Mike, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here, and I can't wait to hear your encounters. I know they took place in Mississippi. If you would you just kind of start from the beginning? Tell us about your first encounter, if you would.
Okay, all right. Me and you talked briefly, and I gave you a little background, but I want to kind of go back to the beginning of the day, because after listening to some of your shows on YouTube, I'm a fairly new listener, and for me, hindsight is 20/20, and there's been a lot playing in my mind over the last month or so. So I was 7 years old. I'm 36 years old now. So this was well over 20 years ago. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I'm a mama's boy. If you look in the dictionary and look up mama's boy, you'll have my picture right there beside it.
Yeah.
So I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and had a lot of responsibility on me. I was forced to be the man of the house at an early age. My dad, I never saw my mom and my dad together. My dad was in and out of prison for a lot of my life, so my mom raised me. I still love my dad, still talk to him every day, but my mom raised me. To get away from the stress during the weekend, I would ask my grandmother and my grandfather if I could spend the weekend to get away from the stress during the week, because I babysat a lot. My mom worked multiple jobs. I would sometimes ask my grandmother and my grandfather if I could spend the night at their place. And a lot of the grandkids always felt that I was their favorite, because they would ask to spend the night, and my grandmother and my grandfather wouldn't let them stay, but they would let me stay. So this particular Saturday morning, we were down at my grandmother's house, and I asked to spend the night, and they agreed, and everybody ended up leaving around maybe 1 or 2 p.m. in the evening. I can't really remember the exact times, but I know it was daylight. And we left to go to the grocery store to pick up a few things, and we went to Walmart to pick up a few things. And I remember being in the back seat and my grandmother and my grandfather having a conversation, and they were talking, and they said, I wonder if the shadows are going to show up tonight, if the ghosts are going to show up tonight. So I didn't think much of it, just sit in the back seat. So we get out, we make grocery, we as you can see, I said make grocery. That's Southern people talk. Most people say buy grocery. Cedric, how are you going to make grocery? But that's the Mississippi in me. We go to the store, we make grocery, and we go back home. I want to say the neighborhood, Wes, if we could talk a few minutes afterwards, I'll tell you exactly what the neighborhood is, and I'll give you a little history on it. But if I was to tell you where this neighborhood is at, people from my hometown would know exactly where I'm talking about. A lot of weird and crazy and strange things go on there. So anyway, fast forward, we get back to the house. It's maybe, around 3 o'clock, we'll say. So I'm playing outside, running around. My grandmother, she's in there cooking and different things like that. For my grandfather, he was a man of man. He was a really, really manly man. He rough and rugged, big guy, 350 pounds, solid, just, big black guy, no nonsense type of guy. But he was really good with us as kids, but we knew how far to go. So my grandmother was a strong, black woman, the homemaker, a nourisher, and her food would make your mouth water while you're eating her food. She makes the best seafood gumbo you ever taste in your life. So she's cooking and getting dinner and stuff ready, and I'm the only grandchild there. So by that time they call me in. Let's just say I want to be 100% truthful with you. I don't know the times, but let's just say it's around 5 o'clock now. So in Mississippi at this time, the sun is about to set, right? So they call me in and they said, hey, come on in. It's time to, take your shower, and we're going to get ready to sit down and eat. So I go in and I bathe. We didn't have a shower. Let me digress. We didn't have a shower. I bathed and got myself together. And so by the time we sat down, the sun is really starting to set to where the sky is starting to change, where it's going to get ready to get dark. So my grandmother and my grandfather, they go out and they sit on the porch. And the only reason why I don't want this story being told is because they're still living, and I know it'll be a lot of controversy. But anyway, so they go out and they sit on the porch. I'm sitting there and I'm watching television. Me and my grandmother used to like Showtime at the Apollo. We would watch that together. But at the time, I think that didn't come on until like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. So we still had a few hours. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Let's just say maybe it's around 6:30 or 7 now. So it's gotten dark, but if you were driving on a road with your lights off, you could still see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's kind of that twilight, twilight. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's dark now. I'm sitting there watching television, and they're sitting out on the porch. And so let me try to explain this to you. So the way this house is set up, and I'm going to be going home soon, and I'm going to send you a picture. And this is what really gives me relief to hear some of the stories, because for a long time I felt that what happened really didn't happen, because I just kind of put it out of my mind. But I'll tell you why I know what happened really happened, because I got confirmation from my mom, who passed away 6 years ago from a brain aneurysm. A blood vessel burst in her brain and it killed her. She never woke up from it. So it's starting to get dark. My grandmother, my grandfather sitting on the porch. So the way this porch set up was, this porch had to be about let's say maybe 7 feet wide, but it was a screened-in porch, a box house. It was a house shaped like a big box. In Mississippi, they call what you have shotgun houses. If you walk in the front door, you can immediately see the back door, right? So if you walk through the front door, it's like a hallway. You may walk maybe 10 feet and it'll open up into the kitchen, but the bathroom and the bedrooms, they're off to each side of the hallway. So if I walk through the front door, I can immediately see the back door, straight through the hallway. That's in Mississippi. You probably heard of that before, but that's called a shotgun house. So this house is shaped like a big box, but this house sits up on four big brick beams. So you have one big beam at the corner, and I would say those beams are about maybe 4 feet high. But this house sits up off the ground. As kids, we could go up under that house and kind of play around. As a kid, you could stand up under it. It was dusty and dirty under there, but we would go up under that house and play and different things like that. So there's 4 big concrete beams that this house sits up off of. And to get up to the front door of the porch, you may have to walk up maybe 6 to 8 concrete steps to open up the front the screen door to the porch. You get onto the porch, and then you walk maybe another 2 feet, and then you open up the front door. So my grandmother and my grandfather, they're sitting out here on the front porch. So as you described, you say it's around the twilight time where it's dark, but you can still see. I walk out to the porch, and I'm listening to them talk. And my grandmother and my grandfather, they're staring across the street. So by the way that this house, it sits up on a hill, but it sits up on this beam. So down, and I'm not good with my distance, I would say, man, maybe about 70 yards. I would say this house is about 70 yards away. Down, if I'm sitting on the porch, and my grandmother and my grandfather are sitting to the front of the porch, and they're in their chairs, they can look down on this double wide trailer. Now, this older woman who was Native American and African American, she had built a porch and different things like that. So the porch was something that was created by someone afterwards once she purchased that house. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so she kind of added on to the house. She built like a porch and a back little deck area. The porch area was closed in. It had a tin top on it, but it was really nice, like a light brown wood type porch on it, where she could come out and sit outside. So if we're looking down, we can see her entire yard except for her backyard. There was a street that separated my grandparents' house from her house, but we could see her house as clear as day. So I walk outside, and my Medea and my dad, I call my grandma Medea, and I call my granddad Dad. My Medea and my dad, they're both sitting out there on the porch, and my grandmother asked Dad, "Oh, look, do you see it?" And I attempting to say their names, and my granddad said, "Yeah, I see it." So I'm looking, I look, all around, and I don't see what they see. And my granddad said, "It's at the window." So I'm looking around, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what they're seeing. I'm still not figuring out exactly what they've keyed in on. And I hear a loud bump, but what it was a slap on the trailer is what I really think it was. I think this thing slapped the trailer. And when this thing slapped the trailer, the living room light went off and the kitchen light came on. And now I'm looking at this thing, and it's huge, man. This thing is huge, and it has the same color fur as a silverback gorilla without the silver, and it looks like a freaking baboon with maybe 3 pair of shoulder pads on going across, and towards the hips it makes like a V, and the legs protrude out a little bit more. The hips are not as wide as the shoulders, but the hips are about halfway wide as the shoulders. And I'm looking at this freaking huge baboon face, hairy covered creature standing at the kitchen window. So the living room light goes out, the kitchen light comes on, and This woman comes to the kitchen window, and this thing has to like almost peep down into the kitchen window. This is just how tall this thing is. This woman I'm looking at this little lady. She looks at this thing. I can see her face. She looks at this thing. This thing looks back at her, and I can see his cheeks come in and out, and it blows. Woof, woof. She looks at it. It gives two. Woof, woof. She leaves away from the window. She walks back towards the living room. She opens up her front door. Have you, Wes, have you ever been coon hunting before?
I haven't. No, I know it's big down there in Mississippi, though.
Yes, sir. We will substitute a coon for a turkey on Thanksgiving any day. This woman brings out first. She sets out a coon. It's a coon trap, and it has a cat in it. She sets that out on the porch. She goes back and she gets another trap, and it's a raccoon in the trap. She sets that out on the porch. Now here's where the thing I can only describe as a giant spider comes from around the porch. My grandmother or my granddad says, "Oh, look, there's another one." So when the head pops on, the woman has floodlights on the side of her trailer. When the floodlights come on, it draws my attention to the reason why the floodlights popped on in the first place. I see a huge head, just a head, kind of peeping from around the corner of this trailer. And then I see what would be the right arm comes from around. And some of the body kind of snakes around the trailer. And then I can see the left arm come around. And the body of this thing comes around, and I see something that's dangling, and I'm thinking, okay, these are arms. But the arms look too small to be arms. So when the rest of the body comes around, it's crawling, but it's up off the ground, but it's on like a belly crawl, but it's on all fours almost. So that's when I see the other two legs. So I'm thinking that, I'm like, what the hell is this? So now, as I explained to you earlier, I realized I saw two arms, two breasts, and then the rest of the legs. This thing crawls to the front porch and stands up. This thing is about maybe a foot and a half smaller than what's standing at the window, but now this thing is now looking over at the thing that's on all fours, walk towards the porch. This thing stands up, and the raccoon and the freaking cat is going bananas in the cage. It's going freaking bananas in the cage. This thing picks it up, walks back around to the back of the trailer where it came from. The big thing that was standing at the window gives another woof and walks off, and they leave.
Talk about scarring anyone really for life. What did your grandparents say?
This is what bothers me, and this is why I wish to remain anonymous. Like, I get emotional, man, because I speak from my heart. You know, people say I wear my heart on my sleeve. That's just me. You know, that's the way God wired me. I can't change it about myself. I'm actually getting a little teary-eyed talking about it. I wish for the life of me that I could remember that date that happened. Because being in the backseat of that car, they knew whatever showed up that night was going to show up. No one can tell me that they didn't know whatever was going to show up that night was going to show up, because they talked about it on the way home, that they wondered if the shadow was going to show up or the ghost was going to show up. They sat there and watched it like it was normal, man. They sat there and watched it like it was normal. That's the only way I can explain that to you.
Yeah,
They sat there and watched it like it was normal, and they whispered and talked to one another to make sure that each other was seeing everything.
makes you wonder if they had seen it before, if they had actually seen it on their property. Obviously, I mean, it's not that far away. I wonder
I'm happy you asked that. I'm happy you asked that question. So this is where I'm really going to get emotional, right? My mom, who I would give my life for, I would give my right arm. The Lord has blessed me to do pretty good in my life, despite the circumstances that I've endured growing up as a young man in Mississippi. Me and my brothers and sisters, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Sometimes we went hungry until the next day. The only time we ate at school was at school sometime. My grandmother and my grandfather would go into their deep freezer, into their refrigerator, and bring food to I lived in the projects. I lived in a really, really rough part of the section of Mississippi where I was raised. I lived in a neighborhood so bad to where the police wouldn't show up until the gunshots stopped. Like, it was really, really bad, man. So as I told you before, staying with my Madea and my papa and my daddy, they gave me a chance to kind of get away because I could run and play where they lived. I had an uncle that lived right down the road from them, where he had goats, a mule, chickens, hogs, and he would pay me $2 a day to go and help him feed slops to the hogs and different things like that. I come from a place where most of the people, they grew everything that they ate. But my mom, being a single mom of several kids at the time, she struggled a lot. And I in between school and babysitting, things got really, really stressful on me because I was the man of the house at an early age. I left home at the age of 14 because my mom ended up getting involved with a guy that used to beat on her. And when I got of age, me and my brother, we weren't going for that anymore. But anyway, so the next day, my mom comes to pick me up. And the ride home, I tell my mom what I saw. I tell her the entire story, just like I'm telling you. And my mom told me, oh, those have been around ever since I was a little girl. My mom told me those have been around ever since she was a little girl. She believed me because she saw it too. I don't know if it was in that same manner, but my mom has seen it too. My mom said those have been around ever since she was a little girl. She believed me.
Yeah, it's kind of nice getting the confirmation, from
Yep.
your mother. Yeah.
My mom told me those have been around ever since she was a little girl, and she believed me. She asked me if my Madea and my daddy know I saw it, and they saw me looking at it too. And my mom told me not to repeat what I saw. But my brother, who is my best friend, I told him too. I told him what I saw too. He was a little skeptical at the time, but he knew that I wasn't lying. And I told him that Mama said she saw the same thing growing up as a little girl. And my mom said everybody around that part of the neighborhood knew about those things.
I want to come back and ask you about if your mom ever shared an encounter. Before we get into that, you mentioned one of the creatures had a baboon look. Did it have kind of a snout, or did it have like that dog's, where their face protrudes? Is that why you say baboon?
This thing looked like a freaking giant but skinny. It had like a giant but skinny gorilla body. It wasn't as wide as a gorilla. But the just imagine if you take a giant baboon's head and sit it on top of a gigantic gorilla body.
I got you.
The snout and the face protruded, so the snout had the wrinkles in it. The face was a dark, almost leathery black. The face was like a almost dark, leathery black. The eyes, I couldn't really see the color on the one that was facing the kitchen window. All I could see was black from the side. Now, when it faced to look towards us, when it faced to look towards the one that was crawling on the ground, all I could see was black. But this thing clearly had like a gorilla. It had a gorilla face, but the snout was more protruded, if that makes sense. And the female looked almost identical, just a little bit smaller.
Yeah, the whole thing is fascinating to me, especially the woman's behavior too. Almost like it was dinner time, and I hate to hear the story about the cat.
That woman came to that window and looked at that thing without any fear. She was not afraid. And this is not a big woman I'm talking about. This is a small woman. This was not a big woman. This was a small Native American and African American woman. She was not a big woman at all.
What a terrible thing to see. I mean, most adults would freak out when they see that. And that's why, I know you clarified it, but that's what made me curious about your grandparents, because it was like, time to watch a show.
And I wonder if they seen it before.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when they're sitting there watching it, and her behavior of feeding them is so bizarre. One thing I really appreciate from your encounter, and it's somewhat selfish and it's vindication for me. I was telling you, Mike, when I first came out with my encounter, I talked about how when we saw it drop to all fours, it moved like a spider. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing you'll ever see. They don't move around like King Kong or like an ape. And I got so much crap for it from all these Bigfoot researchers and experts telling me, well, they don't move like that on all fours. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm just telling you what I saw.
I have the hair standing on top of my head right now. Those things can snake around like a freaking snake. The arm wrapped around that house, I saw like at least 2 feet of arm after I saw the head. And the body snaked around. And then that's when the right arm, I think, either way, the other arm came around. And not even half of the body, the first portion of the body I saw, and I saw something else dangling. And I thought it was the arms, and I'm like, how in the hell do I see arms already? The head and the back that I'm seeing so far in this thing doesn't account for arms showing. It was breasts. Now that I look back on it, hindsight is 20/20. And back then as a kid, I paid attention to a lot of stuff. Those were breasts on that thing. And it snaked around. The belly wasn't touching the ground, but it was a few inches above the ground. I'm not gonna say a few inches, maybe 10 inches above the ground. But this thing was crawling. And it moved, man. This thing looked like a freaking giant black snake. I'm telling you. I know what I saw. I know what I saw. And I love my mom, and I know what my mom told me. And I know what I saw for myself. My mom saw it too.
Yeah, it is. It's really bizarre when you see them moving all fours. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It looks very unnatural, doesn't it? But I mean,
it looks like a spider.
Yeah, it looks like a spider, but
you're looking at this huge head and snout and black eyes. Man.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of.
Crawled around on all fours. I could look directly in this thing's face.
Yep.
I'm looking directly at this thing's face.
Yeah, it's very different. And, one of the things I want to ask you, did your mom ever share with you any encounters that she had on that property?
She didn't. She never shared any encounters, but that land was built on old Indian reservation land. I'm not going to say reservation land, but some of our ancestors are Native American. My family, some of our ancestors are Native American. And there were actually babies and Native Americans buried on that land where several houses were built over. My mom did share that with me. My mom would also say that, and my grandmother was here my grandmother was present when this story was told. I never seen it, but there was a story that said that when it would rain really hard, you could go out and dig certain portions of the ground, and if you dig down deep enough, you would see blood. Now, I've never seen that. My mom said she's seen it, and her mom reaffirmed the story, saying that it was true. I can call my wife outside right now to tell you that. So I left home at an early age, and I started working off the port of Mississippi. I had to be about 19, almost 20 years old. My stepdad used to beat on my mom at the time, and I wasn't going for that. She was still with this guy. He started beating on her when I was around 14 or 15. So by that time, I left home, and me and my wife, we went to the same small high school together. And I lived from house to house. It was only by the grace of God, by the good Lord Jesus Christ, that I graduated from high school. That's how I know, when I look back over my life, God has always had a hand in my life, because I just know God is real and he's always had a hand in my life. But
yeah, I can respect that.
My wife and her dad took me in. My wife's grandmother is also Native American and Black. This house that her dad lived in was an old house, man. I hated this house. The house is still standing to this day. Her dad still lives in this house. We're hoping that when it's all said and done, we could buy this house, man, and tear it down and rebuild it. That's just how creepy this house is. But anyway, I worked off the port of Mississippi. I used to build ATVs. They were all-terrain vehicles, but they were battery powered instead of gas powered. So the battery powered vehicles would allow the hunters to move into the woods more stealthily, if that makes sense. So this was a company that was big business for the small town where I came up at. People are gonna know what town I'm talking about if someone from Mississippi ever listens to this story. But anyway, I would get home early. My wife was in school at the time, so I would get home early. Her dad would still be at work. And mind you, if they hadn't taken me in, I would be basically living out of my car at the time. That's why I love my wife so much. I love my wife and my 5 kids so much. They're my everything. My wife has been there for me when no one else was there for me. My wife is my best friend. I'll give my life for my wife and my kids without thinking twice. But anyway, I get home this particular day at her and her dad's house, and I take a bath, and I get out and I go and I lay down, and I would always close the door to my wife's bedroom at the time. Her dad's door was more towards the front door. Again, this wasn't a shotgun house, because you would come through the front door, but you would see a long hallway, and if you go all the way down the hallway, you make a left. That's where the kitchen was at, towards the back of the house. But when you come through the front door towards your right, that's where that's where my wife's dad's bedroom was at. And if you walk another 5 or 6 feet down that hallway, my wife's room was off to the other side. My wife's room was off 5 or 6 feet on the same side of her dad's, and there was another bedroom across the left, on the left-hand side, right across from my wife's bedroom at the time. So I'm 20 years old at the time. My wife had to be about 18. Yeah, she had my first son when she was about 18. We were fresh out of high school. She may have been 19. I was 21 at the time. So I go in and I lay down and I close the door. I cut the TV off. I'm going to take a quick nap before my wife and her dad makes it in. So when I lay across the bed, I'm laying across the bed with my back towards the door of the bedroom, but my face is towards the window there's a window on the side where if I was laying on my side, I could look at the window. I started dozing off, man, and I hear footsteps coming from the back where the kitchen is at. Clear as day. These footsteps are coming from the back where the kitchen is at. These footsteps come all the way up to the door. Something comes through the door without opening the door and sits down on the bed with me. I was so scared, man. I laid there. When this thing sits down on the bed, it's just like if you're laying there and you know your wife is going to come in and sit on the bed with you. The bed sits down. The bed moved, the mattress on the bed moves down. Something sits down right beside me. I never opened my eyes. I just laid there. Me and my wife had been dating. I prayed. Whatever it was, got back up off the bed, walked back through the door, walked back down the hall until the footsteps went away. Me and my wife had been dating for about a year. By that time, me and my wife, man, we grew up fast. By that time, we had our own place. She was still in school. I was still working off the port I almost said the name of the city. I was still working off the port, building these ATVs. This company had rented a warehouse down there where we would build these ATVs. So I remember going out to dinner with my wife, and I told her about the encounter I had. And my wife told me that she's held that in for so long, living in that house. She has experienced the same thing so many times, but she never told anyone about it.
That's crazy, man. You know,
I would call my wife outside right now. I would walk to my door, and I would let my wife tell you the exact same story that I'm telling you.
No, I believe you. It's bizarre, and now I understand why you want to burn the place down and rebuild it. I mean, I would too.
And her dad, he still has her grandmother clothes from when she died. If you go in that house and you move one chair around, this guy will freaking flip out. He doesn't want anything changed in that house. My wife said one time she was in the house and she heard her dad talking. This is before me and her started dating. And he said that she walked in and said, "Dad, who are you talking to?" He said, "Oh, I'm talking to Mama." I remember one night with my grandmother. This is why me and my wife's bond is so strong, not because we believe in the Lord Jesus Christ with all of our heart, soul, and might. I remember one night staying at my grandmother's house. Have you ever seen a light where you have to pull like the little chain to the chain hangs from the ceiling, and you pull the chain to make the light go out?
Yeah.
In Mississippi, that was really common, but we would tie like a shoestring or either the little ball and chain string would hang all the way down far enough, or if it was a short person, we could reach it. I remember one night my grandmother was in the kitchen shutting everything down. My grandmother got ready to leave my grandmother left. She cut that light off. Clink, clink, cut it off. About 5 seconds later, that light snapped back on. And my grandmother immediately started talking to her mom. She said, "Mom, I know that's you. I just want to let you know that everything's all right." My grandmother went back and she cut the light off, and nothing else happened that night. And if my family members would hear these stories, they know I'm not lying.
And was that the same grandmother, Mike, that you saw the two creatures with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask you a couple questions, but was there another encounter that happened when you were around 2021, or was it this ghost encounter as far as?
Nope. So this happened when I was around 20 or 21. So I'm up in age now. I'm riding with a friend, and we're headed from my hometown to another small town that's maybe about 15 minutes away, give or take. Back then, I used to breed bulldogs. I used to breed pit bulls, and I would sell them on the side to make money. So I had like one of the top male pit bulls in that area at the time. So I was headed to a neighboring town to buy a female that had a real nice pedigree on her. So me and my friend is driving. I'm on the passenger side. We're driving, and on this road, on this stretch of highway, you will see signs that say, watch out for deer, watch out for bears. In my whole entire life of living in that town, I've never seen a bear. I've never seen a bear on that town, in that town, a day in my life. And I relocated from there in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina when things slowed up. That's what caused me to move here now. If I say where I'm at now, they're really going to know who I am. So we're driving. We're doing about maybe 55 miles per hour. I think the speed limit is maybe 60, 65. We're driving and talking. Have you ever seen one of those nights where it's cold, but you can see what's in front of you, but maybe 20 feet in front of you, there's fog. Every 10 to 20 feet, you pass through fog, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those really cold nights. So we're driving, and we know to watch out for deers because we know people that have totaled their cars out on deers. Man, a person will run into a car, and you think they hit a freaking Mack truck. We're driving, and we see in front of us. So on both sides of you, it's open field, right? It's open field, so you can see maybe. I'm not really good with feet and yard and different things like that. So let's just say you can see maybe 20 to 30 feet on each side because so it's a 2-lane highway. I think they probably made it a 4-lane now, but at the time it was a 2-lane highway. And you can see maybe 30 to 40 feet on each side of the highway as you're traveling, and the street lights are beaming off each side. So from the left side where my friend is sitting, we're driving. All of a sudden, we can see like this deer, and I'm like, "Hey, slow down! There's a deer." It was a doe. So this thing runs across the highway, and maybe about 10 seconds behind it, we see a buck. This buck is right behind this deer, and right behind it, I'm thinking that it's a freaking bear times 3 running. And at the time, I think this thing was on all fours, running like a gorilla. And when it got close, it stood up and started running on 2 legs. And by that time, me and my friend, we're at a complete stop. And I think that that's the only thing that saved those deer's life was there was a car there. This thing stopped and stood up on all fours, maybe 10 feet away from us. And man, you could see this thing was hairy. You could see the cone head. Again, it had that baboon type face. But by it looking right at us with the light shining on it, I could see the snout a little bit. The eyes kind of shine like a light, like a moon. Like let's just say like if you look at the moon in the sky with the lights hitting on his eyes, the eyes kind of look like moonlight, but you can see black as well. And we're looking at this thing, and it's standing up. I mean, man, it's erect, and it's standing there with this chest in the air, and it had the broad shoulders, but this thing had way more body mass than what I saw when I was a little boy. And it's standing there, and chest in the air, long arms, and head just. I'm kind of making the motions as I'm explaining, and head just turning from side to side, head high in the air. And we're looking at it. And this thing turns around from the way it came and runs back off into the woods. And I have a friend, I know he wouldn't want me saying what we saw, but he was there too. And he saw it better than I did because he was closer to it because I was in the passenger seat, but I saw everything too. And as we drive on, he's saying that he thinks it was a bear. That was not a bear. Again, hindsight is 2020. I grew up in an area where if I would have told this story in my neighborhood, I know people would not have believed me. But thinking back on it, that was not a freaking bear. That was the same thing, a different one, a male, but the same thing I saw as a young boy chasing those two deer across the highway. Arms like a gorilla.
Yeah.
I'm talking, we could see the hands. Man, this thing stood up like, I'm here and there's nothing you could do about it. I'm here and there's nothing you could do about it. And those deer were running for their life. Those deer were running for their life. And this thing was, that buck, if we hadn't stopped in the middle of that highway, I think the lights, I believe and I know, the lights from that car stopping in the highway like that, where those deer ran maybe 8 feet in front of us, that's the only thing that saved those things. I'm telling you. That's the only thing that saved those deer.
How tall do you think it was, Mike, when it stood up and it was kind of pushing its chest out and kind of standing there? How tall do you think it was?
So Shaquille O'Neal is over 7 feet. This thing had him by at least 1.5 feet. And it was huge like him times 3. This thing was freaking massive. It had the chest plate on it looked like the chest plate of a hairy man / gorilla. The color and everything. You could see the breath coming from his mouth in his nostrils in the night air. That was not a bear. That was the exact same thing I seen as a little boy, but this thing had more weight on it.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, and I get in Mississippi, I do get different reports of them. There's a type that does kind of have a snout that I do get reports of, especially down in Mississippi. And the other thing too, down there, they tend to be more aggressive. I get a lot of aggressive reports, and that encounter, I can't stop thinking about the old woman. What a terrible person, man. Putting a cat. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of a raccoon, but I wouldn't put it in a cage and leave it for a predator to come along, let alone a cat, a house cat.
But did she know these things? Did she know them? You get what I mean?
Yeah, and I've had encounters like that too. I know Anthony 419, episode 419, he talked about, I mean, it's almost the same type of thing. She knew him. She would go out and chatter back and forth with them, which sounds bizarre, but I'd like to say I'd never heard that before. I've actually heard it a lot. And it's odd because it seems to be older women, or at least it seems to be, I mean, I don't want to say it's only older women, but a lot of those reports I've heard of this type of things going on generally is with older women. And I don't know what to make of that. It's so bizarre. You think she'd be terrified, but going
that
off.
woman was not scared, man.
Yeah.
I could picture her face as clear as day. We sat so high up to where her curtains and things were open. I could see her sink. She was standing at her sink looking at this thing, looking up at it. Its cheek sucked in and blew out. Twice.
What do you think that they are, Mike? What's your opinion? I mean, you've gotten 2 really good looks at these things. What's your personal opinion as far as what you think they are?
I honestly believe they have a human. I honestly believe they're human and animal. I honestly believe that somewhere down the line, humans bred with these things, so there's still a slight human aspect to it. But they've been out there so long to where they have a large animalistic instinct to it. I don't believe that it's anything supernatural based on what I've played, since listening to your encounters over the last couple of weeks, close to a month or so. These things are not anything that's supernatural. These things are real, because if it was supernatural, it would need to eat. This thing was chasing those deers. Did I see them eat those two, the raccoon and the cat? No, I did. I would be lying if I said I saw that. But I can guarantee you, they took that cat, those animals off, and they ripped those cages open. They ate them. I'll bet my life on that.
Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. I would imagine that old woman's probably long gone by now, huh? This many years later.
Yeah, she's long gone. She's long gone. I'm 36. I was 7 years old at the time, going on 8 years old. And I remember there was an incident that happened with my family, nothing related to this, to where I remember exactly what age I was.
Yeah,
I remember exactly what age I was, man.
You know what's really fascinating, Mike, is your grandparents talking about it like ghosts. And when I first started doing the show, people down south, they would say the Haints. And I had no clue what they meant. I was like, what do you mean Haints? Why do you guys keep calling them Haints? And it's where we get the word haunt or haunted or ghost. And it's fascinating because when you get down south, a lot of times they don't say Sasquatch or Bigfoot.
They call them shadows.
Yeah, shadows, Haints.
Hey. So yeah. So this is the thing too. This is how I know it's not supernatural. Oh man. When this thing was getting ready, when it was on all fours, crawling towards these things, have you ever seen like a dog that's showing his teeth and giving you a warning? Have you ever seen a dog where like the hair on the back of his back stands up?
Yeah, of course.
The hair on the back of this thing stood up as it was crawling on all fours before it stood up to get on 2 feet to get bipedal. The hair on the back and part of the back ridge and almost the entire head, the hair on the back and the head stood up like if you've seen a dog that's like warning you, like, hey, I don't want to be bothered right now. The hair on my back is standing up. You need to leave me alone. The hair on this, so I just replay this over and over. I really feel like the hair on the back stood up because it's like I'm excited. I'm savoring the meal that I'm about to get ready to eat.
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail. It's a really fascinating detail. I would imagine it scars you for life, after seeing something like that.
Man, I was watching one of your episodes, and I literally had to cut it off. That's just how emotional I got. Man. Yeah. That's just how emotional it made me, man. Some of the episodes, I'm not gonna even say I don't believe, because who am I to say someone is not telling the truth? But some of the things, a lot of the stuff that I've heard, those people are not lying, man. They are not lying. Either they saw something for themselves or they heard it from someone else firsthand to where they can recant the story really vividly. But I know what I saw. And if anyone knows me, they know how much I love my mom. They know how much I love and respect my grandma. They know how much I love and respect my Medea and my granddaddy. They know that I'm a man of my word. I know what I saw. I was raised, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Yes sir, no sir. When grown folks talking, you shut up or you get knocked upside your head into the middle of next week. You didn't disrespect elders. You did what you were told first time. If an older person had to repeat themselves, you're gonna get your ass tore up. Point blank, period. That's the generation I grew up in. If I went down the street and I did something wrong, and my neighbor saw me do something wrong, they were gonna whoop my ass and take me home and tell my grandmother and my mother and my granddad they whooped my ass. And when my granddad got home, I got an ass whooping by him again. That's the generation I grew up in.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the South and some of these more rural areas, because you really get the salt of the earth type people. And I think that if you're local and they know you, they'll share it with you. They'll share what but if you're an outsider, they're not going to tell you anything. And I think down in those areas, honestly, I think way more goes on. I'm out in the Pacific Northwest. I think way more goes on down there than in the Pacific Northwest. In Mississippi, Louisiana, even if you go a little farther east, like Kentucky, West Virginia, same type of thing, man. You get those people one-on-one. They like you. They trust you. They'll share with you. Most outsiders, though, they will not tell you anything. And, I really appreciate that you would take the time. I know you're a busy guy. I know you didn't really want to come on the show. And I'm really thankful that you did, because there's so much to unpeel from the details that you gave with your encounter. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on, brother. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, man. And
that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
Intoxicating danger I like. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Let me float away. Save me from myself, let me drown in my black lake. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Beauty is a black lake, let me sail away. Darkness approaching, deep water keeps flowing. It inhales me in the stormy tide. Endless emotion, a dawn thought, a notion, an epiphany, bring the shore to life. Save me from myself.